Yeah, that's not my pen.
You didn't bring your council people on anything? That was very
I had only a carry-on.
cards.
No, I ran out of room. I only had a carry. Sanded it as much as I could.
Yeah.
Like a shirt.
I wanted to went down and talk to the guy. Okay, we're live. Yeah, all right. Okay, let's call this meeting to order. Notice of an open work session of the City Council of the City of North Kansas City, Missouri, September 19th, 2017. Mr. Eric.
Thank you, sir. Tonight's work session is on a proposed Missouri Development Finance Board application on behalf of the Rabbit Hole. City staff's been approached by the founders of the Rabbit Hole, which is a proposed museum of children's books, wishes to locate their museum at a location here in North Kansas City. A part of the financing piece for the museum would be tax credits offered through the Missouri Development Finance Board, MDFB. And the applicant for MDFB funding actually has to be a governmental entity, in this case the city. So the Rabbit Hole is asked to present its plans to the City Council and request city support for an MDFB application. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Pete Cowden, who's a co-founder and director of the Rabbit Hole, to introduce this project to you. So, Pete.
Hey, thanks, Eric. My name's Pete Cowden, and I am the founder and director, co-founder and director of the Rabbit Hole.
Please.
I'll bring it closer here. Okay, is that better? All right. My name's Pete Cowden. I'm the co-founder and director of the Rabbit Hole, which is, as Eric explained, and I'll show you in a minute, a National Center for the Children's Book that we are developing and hoping to bring to your fair town. This is my friend and development consultant, Jennifer Furla. She's helping us on some of our development issues and financing, and I thought she'd be of use for some of your questions after I present my project. So I'm going to pull something up on the screen for you. All right. Let me know if you guys can see this okay. Okay. I'm going to pull this a little closer. Okay, can everyone see what's the Rabbit Hole logo on the screen, on your screen? Mm-hmm. All right. So I'll try to figure out how to use this technology. So we are building a National Center for the Children's Book. It's most easily conceived as a museum for the children's book. I skipped a... we have an ecology of the Rabbit Hole. So the Rabbit Hole is not just a museum. It has many components. The feature component is what we have built as an Exploratorium, which is a radically immersive experience, exhibit experience for children and adults to literally walk into books and through them. I'll show you some models, give you a better, some references later in the presentation. There will be a full-service bookstore in the Rabbit Hole. And in our ecology, we read and share books, we walk and live in books, and then we have a print shop and bindery where we can make our own books. In the print shop and bindery is modeled after the Minnesota Center for the Book Arts, and it will have a full-on phalanx of printing presses and opportunities for children and adults to make books, to create prints, to build story. We're going to do national author and illustrator residencies on the Rabbit Hole Press, bringing people in from all over the country. We'll have a library and an archive of over 10,000 resource books, and that'll form the hub of our education component. We'll be doing professional development with educators and librarians. And a theater. That's a space where we will offer performance and be partnering with organizations like Paul Messner Puppets and the Coterie Theater. It's a place where we can show that story is the foundation of all culture. So this is early rendering of kind of the feeling we want to give to the visitor of us, sort of, again, immersive feeling where you walk into a wonderland of literature. In this book, you might pick out a few characters. You know, Harry the Dirty Dog is there in in the front. Curious George is swinging from a tree. My Father's Dragon is hanging from the ceiling. These are just components in the permanent architecture of the building. Within the Exploratorium element, there will be 2 immersive galleries that are over 3,000 square feet. And think of them like sound stages or studios where we'll install a single book like Curious George or Where the Wild Things Are, and you can literally journey, walk through them. All around that, there will be nearly 20,000 square feet to begin with of just permanent exhibit space where we will create dozens and dozens of books, bring them to life in small and large scale. I keep skipping over on this. This is Mike Mulligan and Mary Ann, the Steam Shovel. This is a book from the 1930s. In this project, we're celebrating the history of children's literature and the contemporary practice. We want to build things like this, which is Mary Ann, the Steam Shovel, in full scale, coming up out of the basement. In this story, if you recall, she and Mike prove, it's kind of an age of steam story where she and Mike prove that she can still dig the basement faster than an electric steam shovel. And she succeeds, but then is entrapped in the basement and becomes the furnace of the school building. So another example of a permanent key exhibit in our space will be Shel Silverstein's Boa Constrictor, and you can walk into the mouth of the snake, hear the audioscape of his poetry, him speaking, and the illustrations appearing on the belly of the snake. These different sorts of design strategies I'm showing you, straight up drawing and drafting, and then we also do virtual modeling of what we're going to build. This is called Max's House, and it's based on Where the Wild Things Are. This will be a permanent exhibit. We were recently out in New York visiting with the Sendak Estate. We do a lot of working with author estates and publishers to gain rights and permissions for that. In this exhibit, you walk into a Brooklyn apartment, which will resemble Maurice Sendak's home as a child, and you will enter up through a set of stairs to a second level, where you will engage Max's bedroom and then go on his journey. Our mission is to create a living culture around literature that will nourish, empower, and inspire the reading lives of children and adults. Why? Because there's a literacy problem. The statistics aren't good across the board. 50% of kids aren't reading at their level at 3rd grade. That's has a higher impact in poverty-stricken areas and under-resourced areas. There are lots of organizations that address this in very meaningful ways, and these are some of them, just a few really. But there's no place in our culture where we celebrate literature. We know that literacy is a problem. We know that we want our kids to read. We know that reading is a critical component of cognitive development. Not just kids reading, but parents reading their children. This is aimed as much at adults as it is as kids. This is a place that's going to be so compelling visually and experientially that, the distinction between child and adult hopefully will disappear for a lot of people, and they'll explore together. This is a place where you can share. So coming back to this, these are all great organizations. Turn the Page. These are organizations we're going to partner with, and we're going to create a platform for them to have a place in our society where here's this thing that we pour a lot of money into and we pour a lot of concern into, but we can't point to anything where you can say to your kid, yeah, we can go celebrate books here, right? I always give the analogy, if you wake up in the morning and you had to pitch a strike or hit a home run to keep your job, but you never got to see a baseball game, it's kind of like what we're doing with reading. So that's a little bit of the mission aspect of what we're doing, and it's going to be such an enormous platform. There's nothing like this in the country, and it's going to be this enormous platform for schools, for teachers, for librarians, for parents, for these organizations, partnering with libraries. We're already doing that in our pre-operational state. This is a little graphic of showing sort of all the different elements within the rabbit hole, including the print shop and the bookstore and the theater and the immersive experiences. How can we do this? Deb and I, my wife who's not here tonight, is a co-founder, and she and I ran the Reading Reptile bookstore in Westport first and then Brookside. We had the store for 28 years, and in that time, we raised 5 children, and we got to know a lot of authors and illustrators, and we were Reading Reptile is one of the most well-known children's bookstores in the country. And it was because we did all these crazy things when authors came to visit. And we would create performances, and we would make sculptures of the authors and illustrators' work. We'd celebrate it as hard as we could. We had Literature Festival that was what we're still doing now. It's a Rabbit Hole. That's a premier children's literature festival in the Midwest for sure, and in the country. We made all those friends especially in the author and illustrator world. Many of the big illustrators and authors, estates, and publishers are willing to give us access to their intellectual properties so that we can build exhibits around them. That's our big asset, besides just being great people and really nice. This is our governing board right now. It includes Sonia Schaefer, Kim Ansari, Crosby Kemper, Peter Sloan at HOK, Marnie Sherman, Eddie James at Pulcinelli, and Ann St. Peter, who owns Global Prairie, big data firm. All these folks were with us from the beginning. We started 2.5 years ago. This is our National Advisory Board, and it just gives you an idea of the kind of gas we have, on the national side. Kate DiCamillo, who's in the upper left of that picture, is a 2-time Newbery Medal winner. That's the highest honor you can receive in American children's book for writing. Daniel Handler, a.k.a. Lemony Snicket, is the author of the series of Unfortunate Events, which is now a really great Netflix TV show. Linda Sue Park is a Newbery Medal winner. John Cheska is the author of The Stinky Cheese Man and the first National Ambassador for Young People's Literature, an appointment by the Library of Congress and the Children's Book Council. Shane Evans lives here, and he's one of the really notable author illustrators in our community who's won the Caldecott Medal, or not the Caldecott, the Coretta Scott King Medal, and has worked with dozens of wonderful writers throughout his career. Lisa Campbell Ernst, another great local hero who's picture book maker for the last 35 years. So and Brian Selznick, who actually is coming in November, he has a book called Wonderstruck that has been made into a movie by Todd Haynes, and we're going to hopefully premiere that at the Screenland Armour Theater with Brian, who is the screenwriter of the movie. So that's a big deal. It's going to be fun. This is just some endorsements from publishers. We have a lot of support in the industry, and mainly because there is nothing like this in the country. And the publishers support our project in the Midwest. If we wanted to build this in New York, it would be prohibitive price-wise. What we're trying to build here, which may come between $8 and $10 million, maybe a little more, depending on how it plays out, would cost 30 or 40 or 50 million in New York City. So, nobody has a problem with that on the national side, and they have a real eagerness to have a place where we can celebrate literature outside the market. I'm going to spin real quick through our last couple of years. So let me get back on the full view here. Apologize. Where am I? There I am. Okay. So we were in the Crossroads for 2.5 years. We incorporated as a nonprofit in 2015. What we did here, we did a lot of demonstrating. This is a place where we kind of built our vision, made our plan, we grew our idea, and then we demonstrated it in several different ways. We brought funders there, some of them very young, like these guys. And we were really just introducing people to the concept. And it's a big, big idea, and it's hard to wrap your head around in one sitting. And tonight, after we're done, you'll have questions, and you'll have questions when you go home, because it's much bigger idea than people there's so many things involved in it and so many opportunities. So we did our best in this place to make it magical and show people what we were doing. We used it as a workshop as well. Besides the fundraising, capacity building, and all those good things we do as a nonprofit, we made a lot of stuff. In the background, you can see a pop-up, traveling outreach pop-up based on the Adventures of Captain Underpants. This started in 2016. It's traveled nonstop to 30 schools. It spends a week at a time at a school. We've built a model around it. It's a retail model, really. It's $1,000 a week in each school. And we underwrite a lot of that with grants for schools that couldn't otherwise afford them. That's our mission. But we also want to build a sustainable business plan. So we probably average around $450 per visit on this, and that covers travel, and it gives us a little extra so we can keep building and making. Dave Pilkey, this book, just so you know, has sold over 70 million copies worldwide. Dave Pilkey is one of the most, notable and wealthy authors in the world, and it just came out as a movie this summer. You might have seen it. He came to visit. He supported this project. He's already put over $20,000 into the rabbit hole, and we'll give more. He's already pledged $10,000 toward the building, which isn't a huge chunk, but it's very meaningful when you consider this is a nationally invested project. So these are some stats on the Captain Underpants Outreach prototype. It's made out of 30 pieces of plywood. It travels, it folds flat, and then comes up and is taken down and delivered by Belger Crane Yard. They are art deliverer. This is a new project that went out called My Garden, based on Kevin Hankes' books. You might know him as the author of Lily's Purple Plastic Purse. This is for 0 to 5-year-olds. So that just started. This is just some images from our literature festival. We partnered with Kansas City Public Library and the Crossroads Academy. We also partnered with the Neighborhood Tourist Development Association, and we had 9 corporate sponsors. It was totally wonderful. We had 7 award-winning authors from around the country. This is Chavaka Steptoe, just won the Caldecott honor, or medal rather. 1,400 kids came to the Central Library that day, and we had over 600 adults in a 2-day event. And we made money. And we gave away 900 books. One of the great things about this, not just the publishers supporting us, but we aren't even operational yet, and they sent over $10,000 worth of books to give away to each kid who walked out of that literature festival with a book by that author that they saw. They saw 2 authors, so they got one or the other signed. It makes a huge difference. Another big prototype we did, and this is modeling our immersive storybook experiences I spoke of earlier. This was built at 17th and Oak in a vacant building at the time, and it was 3,000 square feet. We built a book called The Incredible Painting of Felix Clouseau by John Agee, which was written and illustrated in 1989. This was an immersive experience that actually had had docents. It took us 4 weeks to build it, and it was great. We, over a course of 6 weeks, and we were only open on the weekends, we had over 3,400 visitors. We sold 400 books, and we engaged almost 20 schools. In this story, Felix Clouseau is a painter, and he comes to Paris in the 1800s, and he has a painting of a duck, and everybody laughs at him, and the duck quacks and walks out of the painting. He becomes a genius in the eyes of all the people there. But unfortunately, after being commissioned to paint many other paintings, they all come alive too, and many of them are dangerous, like volcanoes and snakes. So Clouseau is sent to prison, where he must wait until, in the story, in the king's palace, you go in, and the last Clouseau painting is of a dog who captures the thief who's going to steal the king's crown. The king releases Clouseau. He's a hero, but he's had enough of it, and he returns to his painting. He himself came out of a painting, so that's the bada bing. We modeled this with the gallery. So John came in from San Francisco. He also sent forward his artwork. This was really, really, really successful, with especially with school groups. They came down and they spent at least an hour and a half in the piece, and they would look at the model that you see on your screen. They'd run back into the piece and see if everything was there. One of the schools up in Liberty, it was a project-based school, did a whole project. The teacher jumped out of her car one Saturday when we were busy and said, "Hey, I got to show you a couple of pictures." And her, I don't know, the 5th grade class went back and built the entire corduroy department store out of shoe boxes, and they made their own model. So just showing how this can be used in so many ways as a platform, educationally and otherwise. This is some stats on that I already talked about. We built that on a shoestring. Our immersive exhibits in the Rabbit Hole proper will be anywhere between $75,000 and $125,000 to construct. This is a market overview from our pitch deck, and basically what this is introducing is our models, which are progressive museum experiences that are based on truly radically immersive experiences where you can physically walk into and engage artwork. Our models include the City Museum in St. Louis. Have anybody been there? The beauty of that place is how it changes all the time and it evolves over time. They do, this is actually an old slide, they do over 800,000 visitors a year, which is almost as much as a Kansas City Zoo, to put it in perspective. Meow Wolf in Santa Fe this is Meow Wolf, was built in 2016 in a bowling alley on the edge of Santa Fe. George Martin, who wrote the Game of Thrones, helped the organization Meow Wolf to buy the building for them. They had a story that they wanted to build out. It's a radically immersive experience. They built this Victorian house inside the bowling alley. And this is the most akin model to what you will experience at the Rabbit Hole that exists today. In this story, the family is gone and the son is missing, and there's been a time-space rupture. And when you went farther, you see that there are strange things afoot, and you can walk into the refrigerator, into a landscape beyond that, into a mindscape. It's a very exciting exhibit, and if you have time when you're out there, definitely go into it. There's nothing like it. And those guys did over 400,000 visitors their first year. When we went out to talk to Vince Cadillac, the director, in June of 2016, which was just 3 months after they opened, they were doing 12,000 people a week. It's just there's a hunger for this kind of experience, and this is part of it as well. This is actually an enlarged version of Lex, the son's fishbowl, life size, and all of the places that are in the mindscape beyond the house have clues to the narrative. People spend anywhere between 2 and 5 or 6 hours there. It's a very incredible experience. City Museum you've seen before possibly, but again, it's more of an adventure land. It's not so much a narrative piece, but it shows you this incredible vision. Bob Castley, who's passed on now, had this amazing vision, and he just kept building and building, and still being built in his absence. It's one of the most incredible places I've been to with my kids, anyway. Exploratorium in San Francisco is more project-based, and we like that because it's also really changeable. It really changes up all the time. They have incredible, really moving exhibits. So that's another model. Oh, there's the skyline. Oh, we're in North Kansas City. So that brings us to why I'm here, which is because we're looking at a building on 14th and Knox. It's an industrial building. It's one of the few multi-story buildings here in North Kansas City. This is the view from the roof. 2 years ago, when we started looking for buildings, we were mostly looking at Crossroads in downtown, and we got priced out. It's just so hot there that there's nothing available. And every time we went up to a building to make an offer, somebody from Denver, came in like on a Bugs Bunny cartoon and offered $4 million, for anything. And so we didn't have an opportunity there. Some friends of ours in this building, who one of the owners was like, man, we might be interested in selling this. And so we've been talking with them for almost a year now, since last October, November. And very casual. It wasn't like we never really thought about this until we started exploring North Kansas City and started realizing all the beautiful and cool things that are happening here. It's just a really great thing you have that's happening organically, where businesses are coming in, small and large. And you have large developments like Rick Warner's development. You've got small, beautiful little things like Vela Garage, Bicycle and Tap Room. Those are things that create this wonderful ecology. So this is where we're at. This is a map of where we are. You guys are familiar with that. This is the building. So the building actually looks like the building on the right. Our building is the white one, and then the one on the right is a twin building. That's where Fabric Quilt is. It's a 4-story building. We like this construction very much because it is very malleable in terms of cutting through. We can core into this pretty easily and open it up and create volumes. So we've started to do some design work. This is not what we're making, but we just wanted to see it open and kind of get a sense of what it could feel like. This gives us an opportunity to sort of reinvent a building. We didn't ever really want to build a building, and we are going to corrupt it so thoroughly that it would just feel bad if we built a building. So this was really working for us in terms of its structure and its size. Now, the size of it's important because we're just going to start by activating the first 2 floors. And that's 60,000 square feet, plus the 28 in the basement, which will be offices and a library. We intend to grow up into the building. Right now, there are tenants on the 3rd and 4th floor, and we like that because we want to keep them there until we're ready to move, grow, and get bigger. These are some plans for the space. This is the 1st floor, which is at dock level. And this is just very preliminary, but it shows you kind of what we're thinking. There's a bookstore right when you walk in. There's a maker space. You can see the ticketing area. There'll be a theater over there on the left. And then everything above that is Exploratorium. Those are permanent exhibits. You can see over here Mike Mulligan's going to be up in that where that little semicircle is. Everything to the left is a back of house. So there's a expansion building on the back of this building, which is also part of the property, which houses Arctic glacier ice. But a third of that building is open, and that's where our fabrication shops, our workshop, our paint booth, and everything else will be back there. This is an artist-driven project. We're going to build all our own exhibits. We're not, so our artist team is going to be upwards of 15 to 20 fabricators all the time, working constantly. This is a 2nd floor with spiral staircase goes up into a big panorama of the 100-year history of the American children's book. On the left, you see the 2 areas that are designated for immersive galleries. The immersive galleries, again, will change out every 4 to 5 months with new exhibits, so you can come walk through a new book. That'll just be part of the heartbeat of the whole wonderland of books. In between those will be where the Discovery Gallery is the only microclimate in the space, and that's where we'll have artwork and whatnot. The print shop is on the far right, print shop and bindery. Again, that'll be accessible separately from the actual Exploratorium, and will be accessible to adults. There'll be open studio there in the evenings where you can come and if you're interested in printmaking or letterpresses, you can come, or you can come learn how to run a press and make a print or make a book. So we're excited about offering something that's not just, I mean, kids are the focus, but it's really a shared experience. And then the basement area, this has the library and resource center, which you'll be able to walk down into from the bookstore, and then offices and staff rooms. And it's a good relationship because we'll be working constantly and needing that as a reference library for our professional work anyway. This is 1st-year operating projections. It's based on 75,000 visitors in the 1st year. That number is taken sort of as a low average from some of the institutions here in Kansas City, just to give you some context. Science City just got over 200,000 visitors last year. Twain Miniature Museum does about 35 to 40,000, and Wonderscope used to do just under 50,000. It's an underserved market. Up in Omaha, in the Omaha Children's Museum, which is half the market and half the tourism, they do 320,000 visitors a year. We know that we can pull more because we're going to create a space that's going to change a lot and often. So people are going to be able to come back and bring their friends and see new things. 1st-year revenues and expenses. These are fluid numbers right now. We've been working with them for some time, but those are changing, but pretty close. They're staying in line. Right now we project between 35 and 40 employees to open. So that would be in 2019. And the construction and build-out I'll talk about in a second. Actually, I'll talk about it right now. This is our capital campaign slide right now. Again, it's a little bit fluid. Building is $2 million. Right now, the construction for the core and shell is about $3 million, and the exhibit and the internal transformations run around $3.5 million. We're building in costs for operating reserve too, and soft costs, of course, are a little bit flexible. But right now, kind of worst case scenario, we're looking at 12 to 13 million dollars, but we're actually hoping to go closer to 10. Oops, sorry. There's a timeline. So we just completed our startup phase. We are in our transition to capital and our property acquisition. We're organizing our capital campaign right now, which we'll announce upon acquiring the building, and we're building capacity. Capital phase we hope to begin early this spring, and we really would like to open in 2019 when we can celebrate in our national grand opening the 100-year anniversary of the Children's Book Council. Again, a lot of conversations in New York and Boston with publishers, and very supportive and excited about what we're doing. So part of our plan, and I'm going to let Jennifer talk a little bit about it as well, is obviously this is a big project. It's an expensive project, but we think really high value in what we're delivering, for what we're delivering. I'll give you an example of a comparative. In Union Station right now, they're going to put in a 7,500-foot exhibit space. I think the Boston Children's Museum is installing it. And it's 7,000 square feet at $4 million. So what we're delivering, in 60 to 70 to open comes out to well under $200 a square foot, whereas that exhibit I just cited was close to $600. So, but in our strategy right now, we recently received a $1 million pledge from one of our donors and supporters that we're building around right now. We're conducting a lot of high-level conversations with potential major funders. In the meantime, we're exploring tax credits, and we recently met with one of the board members of the Missouri Development Finance Board, and we're invited to submit an application for tax credits for contributions for 2018. In order to qualify, now this is a preliminary application, so it's not an extraordinary, the bigger one is 30-some pages, which is great too, but for right now, we just need to get it in front of them. Part of the process involves partnering with the city, and the city needs to be our partner in order for us to qualify. So that's why I'm here today, is to appeal to you guys to consider partnering with us in our project, and I think Eric can address some of the issues as well, and I'll answer any questions. Right now, there will have to be some investment from the city. It doesn't mean $1 bazillion, but it means it could be many different things that are open conversations that we can have, whether it's streetscaping, whether it's parking, helping out with parking, or things of that nature. But there has to be a true partnership in order to access these funds. To us, it could mean up to $1.5 million to $2 million in tax credits, which would be a huge game changer for us, and it would enable people to give to our project who wouldn't otherwise give. So it's very important to us to be able to try to access these. There are lots of other issues around this, but let me stop here and ask you guys if you have any questions.
Who wants to go first?
Go ahead.
Go
ahead, Mayor.
No, Tom, okay, Rick?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the building you're talking about. I was on the fire department for years. I don't know of any parking though. All I know is street parking down there.
Right. Well, one of the good pieces of news to that was I just was able to make contact with the owner of a parking lot right across the street, right across Knox, just east and south. No, it was, I think you know this fellow, Bill Hirschway, or Jim Hirschway? Bill Hirschway? That ring any bells for anybody?
Not me.
He runs he has a real estate interest of some sort. I had to dig pretty hard to get to him. He had an organization called Camel Rock Investments. It's just whatever his tool is, and he owns some property. But anyway, he's willing to sell, and that'll be able to accommodate up to probably 60 cars. I did not bring. I kicked myself. I had a little slide to bring on that very topic. but it's just to the, again, the east and a little bit south, so it's adjacent to the property. The other property we've been looking at, but I haven't had any success in reaching the owners directly, is the Cook, well, it's the Pollant, Cook Paint, whatever they're called, but it's Pollant is the name now. They have the buildings directly across the street, and then they have a parking lot directly adjacent to their building, and then there's a right-of-way and a big, long, narrow parking lot. It's about the size of a football field. That is something that is very attractive because it would certainly take care of our needs for quite a long time. With the parking area on the east side, I think we could certainly, that together with a parking plan and some designated parking for the Rabbit Hole. I know that the right-of-way alongside the building is city-owned, and that would be a discussion to have about what could be done with those. There's a little bit of parking. There's an enlarged right-of-way behind the building, but I don't know the context of that yet. It's something I'm exploring. But if you look at Johnson County map or Clay County map, you can see there's an expanded right-of-way. There are trucks in there now. I don't know who uses it. But you're right. It is a big issue. It's one of our biggest challenges.
Maybe Eric could say what kind of skin in the game that the city would have to have. That's my primary interest. My secondary, I'm a great proponent of illiteracy. I have close family members that teach. One teaches remedial reading, special needs kids, and I taught adult basic education at Maple Park. It's important to have illiterate people in this country. It's sad when you see a grown man or a woman that can't read a letter, and I'm a big proponent of that, but we'd have to know what this was involved for the city. So Eric, maybe you could speak to that issue.
Yes, sir. Well, so as Mr. Cowden mentioned, so I think there'd be, first of all, as I noted at the very outset, one of the roles of the city would need to be that it needs to be a governmental entity that's the applicant. So we would be the applicant for these tax credits per this program on behalf of the Rabbit Hole. Our financial advisor, Matt Webster, is here tonight, by the way. He has some familiarity with the program, so if you have specific questions about that, he might be able to answer them better than I could. But that would be the first thing that they would be asking of us, is to submit an application on their behalf. They'd fill out the application, they'd do all the hard work. We would sign it, assuming the council is supportive of this. The application itself is kind of a two-step process. There's a pre-application, and I'm going to go ahead and ask Crystal to hand out, it's actually just a two-page application that Pete has indicated he'd like to file sometime pretty soon, maybe in October. And again, we would be the signer of that as the applicant. And I'm passing it out. As you can see, it really is a pretty bare bones thing at the moment. It's really providing some very basic information about the project. We do a similar thing here in the city when we have sort of a pre-application, which we ask people to fill out when they're asking for some kind of economic development incentive, just to give us some very basic information about the project. And my hope would be, if it works out with their timing and ours, that maybe if they have this ready to go, we might have this on an agenda next meeting. Again, assuming that you're generally supportive, and then a full application would come at a later date. And then with regard to the skin in the game, yeah, this is something we only learned of ourselves a pretty short time ago. And Matt has spoken to the staff at the Missouri Development Finance Board a little bit about the kinds of things that they might be looking for. Doesn't necessarily have to be a financial commitment, could be an in-kind. Some things we've talked about are maybe possibilities for streetscaping, perhaps helping them with some kind of a license agreement to at least allow for the on-street parking in the area that could be reserved for them. That would be some kind of a city commitment. And perhaps in some kind of way assisting with the purchase of parking, perhaps with some kind of a lease-back arrangement where we would make an initial expenditure and then recover our investment over a period of time. That's something that we've talked about a little bit. We really haven't gotten very far in our discussions. I'm not prepared to go too deep into that, but that's something that we think might be something that the council might consider when that time comes. So those are some of the things that we're talking about.
Eric, would tourism tax do anything for them in that respect if we should go that direction?
Well, if you wanted to provide a financial,
Yeah,
some kind
I'm
of
just saying
financial
if-
skin in the game, I don't think there's any question the Convention and
Tourism.
Tourism Fund would qualify.
Okay,
as
that's
a
what I
source
was
for
wondering,
that.
if that could be involved, if it was necessary.
I don't think there's any question that this would be a tourism draw that
Oh, yeah.
would qualify for financial.
Zach? Zach?
Couple of things. Well, first of all, this is a really neat idea. I commend you on that. To kind of piggyback off of Captain Underpants' question here, Bill's question, on the tax credits, is that like property tax, or forgive my naivety on this, is it property tax, or is it like, what kind of tax credits are we looking at here that they're applying for?
Good evening, everybody. Matt Webster with Emeritus, the city's financial advisor. Let me address that. So this is a program that has existed in Missouri for many decades, and it's actually what they call contribution tax credits. So this is a state program where the state provides direct incentives to projects that the Missouri Development Finance Board, which is the board appointed by the governor, that makes the decisions. They have a $10 million budget every year for these tax credits, and the way these tax credit works are as follows. The sponsor of the project, in this case the Rabbit Hole, or their financial contributors, would donate money, and there would be a targeted amount of financing that the MDFB would give. You know, it might be $1 million, might be $2 million. Those, you know, it could be north of that. It really depends on how much competition there is across the state. Most of these projects, as you might imagine, end up in the metro areas of both Kansas City and St. Louis, and there are some that are outstate, obviously. But the way the project works is it's more like a charitable donation. So a project puts in some kind of cash contribution. So let's say you've got a donor who wants to donate $1 million to build something in the state of Missouri. If the state is persuaded that this is a worthy project, something that, as you mentioned, Councilman Clevenger, that might draw tourists into the state, that's often a big thing for them, or reflect well on the state, or, you know, it could be any number of things, intangibles. But they will provide you a 50% match to that donation. So you put in $1 million, the state gives you $500,000 in the form of a tax credit. You take that tax credit and you sell that tax credit to somebody who has a state of Missouri income tax obligation. So often it's industrial companies, sometimes wealthy individuals. And that money is put into an account and can be used for certain improvements that the applicant and the state agree are appropriate. So it might be installing the exhibits. It might be you know, building something either inside or outside the building. Generally, the threshold is it has to be a public facility being something that's defined as something that's open to the public. The notable examples of large tax credit projects in this area, and I've worked on the largest, is the sports stadiums that Jackson County owns and recently renovated back in 2006-07. The other large project would be the Performing Arts Center, where Missouri Development Finance tax credits were used, and then most recently, and over a period of years, the Science City at Union Station, where the MDFB has provided tax credits. So it's a pretty well trodden path, but it's a contribution tax credit. I prefer to think of it as a kind of a charitable donation, where the state chooses to use some of its resources to provide incentives for projects that they believe are particularly worthy.
Rick?
I was with the library board last night. They had their board meeting, and they are really excited about this. And of course, they give all their support, moral support. They don't have any money, but they're really excited about it. And you know, a lot of the parking issues might be taken care of. If you have events in the evenings or weekends, it's a ghost town down there, and you know, you probably have all the street parking you wanted on those occasions. The only problem you would have are finding places like the gentleman on the east or whatever would be during during the day when the factories, QFAC Davis paint's open, and I don't know what Cooks does anymore down there, if they're still producing polymers or not, but, you know, you could work something out on that probably.
Mayor?
You know,
Matt, can you address, are there any concerns that, you know, we should take into account as the city council, or anything that the city should watch out for or be aware of in this process?
You know, so I view these projects as real investments, both in the state and the community, and that's how the state looks at them. So the answer would be no. I don't think there are any particular concerns. What the state does expect, and Eric mentioned it, is they expect some contribution from the applicant, the city or the county or whatever the municipality is, and you know that's negotiable, and that's something they look for because they don't want to put state money into a project that a city itself would not be prepared to invest in. But I prefer to look at it as truly an investment. I mean, if something like this opens and if they have any real degree of success, and I believe they would, you know, you're bringing a lot of people into North Kansas City, in an area where there really haven't been very many people, and people who would patronize the businesses in the city, and that produces sales tax dollars, which, you know, in some sense may more than make up for whatever your initial contribution is. So from that standpoint, I really do see it as an investment, and I think, you know, we just want to be cognizant of that. We want to be conscious of that, you know. So we'll look at the numbers and be sure that we agree that it makes sense. But I think, you know, based on my conversations, as I said, I've done business with the MDFB before for other clients. I mean, they seem excited about this. I think they should be excited. And I think it'd be a great project to put anywhere in the metro. And frankly, it's fantastic that they're looking here in this community.
Yep, agree.
well, what do we need to do? I mean, I think
I think the first thing, I mean, again, unless there are any council questions, they're looking for first just an initial indication tonight that this is something that you'd be supportive of. And if you did indicate that, then when we have this initial application to submit, when it's ready, when they filled out the numbers for us and everything, and are asking for signature, I'd put it before you for your vote, and that would be our entry into the program. And then, as I say, you know, we don't necessarily have to figure out what the city contribution to the project would be right away, but that's certainly something we need to be thinking about ahead of the final application. So those are the things that I think are before you at this moment. But the first thing I think that the Rabbit Hole is probably looking for is, are you supportive of this in general and providing the city's imprimatur for it?
all right.
Okay, a couple questions for you. Will there be a charge to enter the exploratoriums?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we do our billing on an emission model, but it's also on a social impact level as well. So one of the things we're trying to balance that I mentioned earlier was striking up a balance for a sustainable program that isn't dependent on philanthropy, but can rather access philanthropy to create the strongest impact on visitors who couldn't otherwise come, whether that was a school, whether that were families, whether that's a free night, whether that's, I think one of the important things that we've faced in the philanthropic landscape is, you know, people want to see a bottom line. They don't want you crawling back after 1 or 2 years and saying, hey, I need, you know, 50% of my operating funds. We're trying to, we're working on pro forma with an organization called the IFF right now. It's a nonprofit organization that helps organizations like us understand and acquire real estate sensibly, and part of that is facility modeling and assessment, and also pro forma and operations. So right now we have a really great cash flow, and we're going to be able to, you know, assuming that we have the right assumptions, we're going to be able to maximize our impact. We're going to be able to go beyond the walls of the rabbit hole, so to speak, and go all over the metro. Again, this is going to access all the metro. They're going to be coming to you to here, and not just the metro, but regionally. It'll be there's quite a cult of librarians around the country who are going to be coming here. It could mean conferences coming here, educational teacher conferences. It has a national aspect. So, but anyway, to your point, we're trying to balance both of those things. We want to create the biggest impact socially and from a mission perspective, but we want to also have a really sustainable business model. And what right now we're using an average of like a $10 admission, but that could go down, you know, to 6 or 8, and schools will pay much less than that as school groups. I mean, we're looking at other programs on how they function around town as well. You know, we think what we're going to offer schools in particular is going to be high value as well, more in the $4 to $5 range. So, you know, less than going to a movie for a class or, you know, and they're going to have the time of their lives. So we...
Pardon me for interrupting.
Yeah, go.
There will be, pardon me, I'm Jennifer Furla. Excuse me for interrupting, but there will be several areas within the complex that are no admission fee.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of accessible areas within it where you can come. Mostly the admission mile is built around the heart of it, the experience, the exhibit experience, which is the immersive storybook experiences. But in order, there will be parts of the permanent exhibits that people will be able to access, and the bookstore is going to be accessed. There'll be people who are going to come to the bookstore just for story time and to have a book club or or to make a craft or do a maker's thing, you know, there. So the print shop as well have accessibility. So yeah, there are lots of.
So there'll be a bookstore where you can purchase books as well as a library. Will you be checking out books from that library?
No checking out, although we are looking at possible, like really interesting partnerships with North Kansas City Library, maybe Casey Mo Library, creating a sort of new model where those entities can have presence in our entity that's meaningful, but probably not a lot of checking out. It's more of a space where parents and kids can walk in if they don't want to buy a book and sit down and read and experience that.
If you do not get partnership from the city of North Kansas City, will it not happen? Will you not come to North Kansas City?
No, no, but I will say it. I will turn that over and say I'd be sitting here talking to you whether or not we were going for MDFP credits. I want your support. I want you behind this project because I think it's going to be really meaningful to the development that is already going on here, bringing families to the area, and like Matt and Eric suggested, really synergizing with the places that are popping up right now, like Chicken and Pickle and places like that are, and opening up corridors. And in your master plan, I've seen a lot of wonderful bicycle and pedestrian sort of pushes, and I've talked to Sarah about that too, about how those are by, in the data, the more walking friendly, the more bicycle friendly your corridors are, the more productive they are in terms of generating tax revenue. So we're all for that. We're not afraid of money or helping you make money, but we also have a mission and we want to fulfill it.
I want you to know that I do support this. My son and I actually got to see the Captain Underpants at Mid-Continent Library. It was great. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Be really brief with this. Looks like a great project. I think it's going to be a good fit for the city, and look forward to supporting this.
Thank you.
I would encourage the council to move this thing forward. I think that we're seeing the genesis of North Kansas City turning a corner in the things that we have to offer the public, the people around us. We're seeing senior apartments. We're seeing places to eat and drink establishments. We're seeing now the possibilities of a great children's program here in North Kansas City, which will attract young people, young marrieds, and others to come to North Kansas City. I think it's a wonderful thing that might happen, and if it happens, more power to it. So I would encourage us to move it forward.
Move it forward.
All right, sir. Well, I'll be in touch with you about the next step tomorrow.
Great. Thank you guys so much for letting me share this with you.
Motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?